The NFL Network, Pete Thompson, ranks the Eagles number 3 in their latest power poll. We know it doesn't matter where you are now, it's where you end up at the end, but it is just good fodder to give an indication of what people who cover the league think about your team. 3rd best in the NFL?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, with all the problems that they've had in the secondary and their propensity. Now, this game, the fourth quarter has been an issue for the Eagles. The fourth quarter points that they've been giving up, that hasn't gone out of my mind yet. Let's put it that way. I think that they're good. I don't think they're great.
They're going to get some reinforcements. By the way, I got a text message.
Chargers with 14 points in this last fourth quarter. So how many is that now? Remember last week that was one of the questions asked about.
21 last week, or 24 last week, I guess it was.
So that theme continues.
That's a lot of points in one quarter. Text message wants to know what's the word on Sidney Jones playing this year. I don't know if there's any resolution to that. Let's bring John McMullen into the conversation. We'll talk some Eagles. We'll talk some NFL as week 4 we put a bow on with ESPN 97.3, ESPN.com Eagles insider John McMullen, national football columnist at FanRag Sports. He joins us now here on the Sports Bash. Johnny Mac, what's up?
Hey, guys. How are you?
Doing well, John.
It's a week 4, man. The quarter poll is here. So much to dive into. Any word on Sidney Jones, by the way, why that text message just came in?
No, actually, Jim Schwartz was asked about Sidney today. There's still no timetable, and it's obviously he's got to be out for the first 6 games, and then from there you have 3 weeks to decide if he's ready to go and activate him. So I still think there's a very good chance that this team is potentially very, very cautious with him, and there's still a chance that he will be redshirted for the entire season. I think a lot of it comes down to Ronald Darby. If he's back in the 4 to 6 week estimate, the original timetable, I think it's more likely that Sidney Jones is sitting for the entire season.
Do you think if the team is having success, that would say we don't need him, or we don't want to use him, or we don't want to rush him back because we're having success? Or do you think, hey, we're having success, we got Darby back, and we can get another piece back?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it. If you could say, I said it earlier in the year, even before the Eagles got Darby in the trade, that while cornerback looked really, really bad in the present, it could be really, really good in the short-term future. That's even, magnified more now that Darby's here, because if you start thinking about Darby as your number 1 corner, Jones as your number 2 corner, all of a sudden Jalen Mills is number 3, and arguably, Patrick Robinson's been better than everybody, so you're not going to force him out. And then Rasul Douglas is a 5. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's for next year. I mean, you look at it, March, an Achilles injury for a player at that type of position, and the fact that cornerbacks have to run, and you want to make sure they're 100%. I said it from day one, basically. The Eagles are going to be very, very cautious for Sidney Jones. If he's completely healthy, he'll play. But the way Jim Schwartz deferred it today, there's no evidence that the Eagles are thinking that is coming up anytime soon.
Yeah. You wrote about Patrick Robinson yesterday. Schwartz talked a little bit about him today. He's kind of locked that position up, it seems like, as that nickel guy.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, he's played well. That's an understatement. He wasn't even thrown at by the Chargers by Phillip Rivers. Now, part of that is the fact that you're trying to pick on Rasul Douglas and Jalen Mills to a certain degree, so you never get to Patrick. But it's still, it's very rare you go through an entire game and nobody throws at you, even if you're Patrick Peterson, even if you're Josh Norman, even guys with huge reputations. He's just remember, he's a former first-round pick, and he's had a ton of injury problems in his career. The one time he was healthy, he played very well, and he's healthy now, and he's playing very well. He's obviously the Eagles' best cornerback. The question is, do you want to just waste him as a slot corner when you have Rasul Douglas struggling out there? The way Jim Schwartz talked about it today, they're going to keep him there because he's excelling, and they're going to try to make do with Rasul out there at least until Ronald Darby is back.
John, when you write about the Eagles' late-game defensive struggles on our website on 97.3 ESPN, you use the phrase troubling trend. Is the troubling trend becoming a growing problem? Is this going to continue, or do you think they have a solution or see a way out of it?
I think the solution is getting healthy and getting certain players back on the field. I think it's going to continue to be a problem as long as the cornerbacks that we just spoke of are out there. I mean, this team gives up big plays, and you saw a 75-yard touchdown. You saw a 50-yard gain to Keenan Allen. You saw a 49-yard gash to Keenan Allen. These guys are deficient. And, you know, in Rasul's case, you hope he improves as he continues to get more playing time. He's hardly the first rookie that has struggled. He'll hardly be the last. So you hope for improvement while he's out there. Jalen Mills always competes, but he's got some physical limitations that are going to always be in play as far as speed goes. So I think the issues in the fourth quarter have to do with the personnel that's been out there and the fact that Rodney McLeod returned against the Chargers, but he's still not 100%. He missed the game against the Giants. We talked about Corey Graham being out, Jalen Watkins being out, Darby, obviously the most notable of them all. It's tough. When you have that many bodies down in the secondary, the positive part is the Eagles are finding ways to win games. In theory, they shouldn't be winning games with these players out on the field. So that part of it's a very good sign.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. A couple other things you wrote about today, that left guard rotation. I guess foreseeable future, that's what we're going with here? We're going with the college rotating quarterback system at left guard?
It seems that way. It does. I think if Chance Warmack all of a sudden starts playing better, I think it's more likely he wins the job outright than Stefan Wisniewski, and we've talked about it a lot. It's strange to me. They've kind of pigeonholed Wisniewski as this guy who's a great interior backup, but you don't necessarily want him as a starter. And in a lot of ways, he's very comparable to Alan Barber and what he was able to do. He's just a professional, solid player. He's got some athletic limitation. He's not the quickest guy in the world, but he just knows how to play at this level. And the Eagles seem obsessed with the upside of Isaac Seumalo. In the first two games, you saw how that worked out. Now they're trying it with Chance Warmack. Chance did play a lot better against the Chargers than he did against the Giants. So hopefully that's a trend that continues in the positive direction. But for whatever reason, the Eagles don't want Wisniewski being the starting left guard. I don't necessarily understand that.
Does he have a clause in his contract that says he makes more money if he gets starts or something?
No, he doesn't. In fact, he's paid very well for a backup. I mean, the Eagles have a ton of respect for him. It's weird. I guess that's just what they want his role to be. But at some point, as I said, and to their credit, I mean, he's out there a lot. He's out there more than Warmack, so they do realize he's their best left guard. They're just trying to get the other guys up to speed to where they don't have to use them. And they're winning games to this point, so it's not really a problem. And over the last two games, the offensive line has been off the charts, so you can't criticize it from that standpoint. But it does seem to be a strange decision.
John, speaking of the offensive line and off the charts for the second straight week, Jason Kelce is graded high in Pro Football Focus numbers. Do you buy those numbers? Are you into them? Because they're suggesting that he's one of the best centers in the league. Why this resurgence of Jason Kelce after he spent so long as public enemy number one?
Well, part of it is Eagles fans were wrong. I mean, the problem with Jason Kelsey is he struggled really, really mightily at the beginning of last season. But the second half of last season, he was very good. And he's continued that early this season. And that's been the trend that he's been able to buck. Because really, if you go back 2 years, he's had very slow starts and come on down the stretch. But he has played better this year. Over the last 2 years, and it seems to be he's not getting blown up. His problem had always been he struggles with really big and strong nose tackles who can blow him up at the line of scrimmage. So he's obviously made some adjustments as far as technique goes to be able to better handle that type of player. He's always been one of the most athletic centers in football. He's always been one of the smartest centers in football. And now he's playing at a Pro Bowl level again. He's been named to the Pro Bowl, but hasn't really played at that kind of level. Now he is. And there's a reason why this offensive line has been so good. And you mentioned Pro Football Focus and Kelsey. Well, Peters is the second-ranked tackle in football. Johnson is fifth. So you have two of the top five tackles in football. You got one of the best centers in football. And you have Brandon Brooks, who's a top-tier right guard. So when we go back to the offseason and they said this is the best offensive line in football, and at that time it included Alan Barber, that's where they are now that they have Wisniewski playing at that kind of level at left guard.
And, John, you know, they were 3-1 last year. Now, there's some differences between this team and last year's team, but a lot of the hiccups began when Lane Johnson went down. And as you wrote about today, he is really an underrated part of the success. Now, I don't know that he's getting the publicity that he even got last year when he went out. Like, it was like, holy mackerel, there's a big difference here. I don't hear his name a whole heck of a lot, but what has he meant to this team's success this year?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look at the numbers, and they're very, we're 20 games into the Doug Peterson era, so it's a very round number. The Eagles are 10-10. Through those 20 games. They're 2-8 with Lane Johnson. Without Lane Johnson, they're 8-2 with him. I mean, we always talk about this being the ultimate team sport, and it is, and you can't really just hang success and failure on one player, even a quarterback, never mind a right tackle. But I think it's pretty fair to say this team's a heck of a lot better when Lane Johnson is on the field than when he's off it, and it's evident. Now, they had a lot of other injury issues as well on the offensive line when Lane was gone during his suspension, so that played into it. And we know all the context. But the bottom line is when he's out there, this team wins. And he's one of the best right tackles in football. And if you look at how the NFL has sort of evolved over the past 5 years, it used to be the left tackle had to deal with all the pass rushers, and Jason Peters is really good at that as well. But you look at what Lane Johnson has faced in the first 4 games, it's Ryan Kerrigan, it's Justin Houston, it's Jason Pierre-Paul, it's Joey Bosa, and for the most part, he's dominated.
Yeah, and you talked about Peters on the other side. Brandon Brooks, another guy, we haven't heard a lot about him, but overall, they're doing pretty well in run blocking. Is there still some concern, though, about the hits that Wentz has taken?
Yeah, I mean, there's always concern when your quarterback is getting hit, but part of it
is that on him or is it on the line?
It's always part, it's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, but it's pretty evident as far as Carson. The way Carson plays, he tries to extend plays. And you see it in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger. If you play that way, you're going to take hits. It doesn't matter how good your offensive line is. And, hey, it's something you have to live with. To this point, he's been able to stay healthy, and you hope that continues for a very young player. But you also hope he starts to understand things a little bit better and maybe sort of throw the football away and live to play another down, so to speak, rather than trying to extend every single play. But that's part of the maturing process of a young quarterback. As far as individual pass blocking grades, before the play sort of falls apart, and you're only supposed to hold off the pass rushers for a certain amount of time, by and large, the Eagles, except for left guard when Isaac was in there, they've been good.
John, you talk about a young quarterback. Carson Wentz is certainly that. And I saw a tweet earlier today that Frank Reich apparently said that Carson Wentz is awesome when the play action fakes. I mean, didn't he ever watch Steve DeBerg back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, he called him the best. I thought that was a little over the top. He is good at it, though. And it's, I would add Brett Favre to that list, but I think he's the best I've ever seen as far as selling sort of the play action and things of that nature. But Carson is natural at it. He takes it seriously. That's half the battle. A lot of quarterbacks, Sam Bradford is that way, who used to be here, sort of, they do it but they're not selling it all that much, so it's not going to have that much effect on the defense. So it is one of those little things that can be important. But yeah, I think Frank was a little over the top in saying he's the best he's ever seen, because Frank's been around for a while.
You think the rest of the league is starting to get their eyes open to Zach Ertz, and do you think he's on pace for a Pro Bowl kind of year? Because his numbers, again, maybe he didn't get to the end zone, but his numbers were very good again.
Well, no, I mean, the rest of the league already knows about Zach Ertz. I think for whatever reason, the fan base here doesn't appreciate what he does. He's already been a top 5 tight end in this league as far as pass catching goes. From the Eagles' standpoint, they're excited he's finally making some run blocks, and he had a big block on the LeGarrette Blount 68-yard run. They know, hey, as far as it, you can talk about Travis Kelce. Jimmy Graham's not what he once was. He's one of the top 2 or 3 pass catching tight ends. Jordan Reed would be in that category, but he's always hurt. Zach is tremendous catching the football. His issues have always been blocking, and he's not the only one. I mean, that's kind of, we talked about the evolution of football as far as pass rushers. As far as tight ends, there's not a lot of Mark Bavaro types in this league anymore who can not only catch the football but also seal the end or pass block an opposing defensive end. At least Zach's getting a little bit better at it, though.
Yeah, he's number 1 in receiving yards at 245, number 1 in targets, catches, and if you graded out how many catches and how many yards he'd have a season with 104 catches and 1,300 yards, plus, like you did mention, the block now, so that means he's finally looking like a complete tight end.
Yeah, I'm not sure about. I'm not gonna say he's complete, because he's still got issues when it comes to blocking. But again, you're sort of nitpicking, because the Eagles need him to be the receiver. He's the best receiver on this team, including the wide receivers. And obviously he's Carson Wentz's favorite target. And I think he's been more impactful this year, even though Torrey Smith has been terrible, basically, for his own production. His presence on the field and his ability to stretch the field and run has opened up some of those intermediate routes for Zach Ertz, and that makes it easier for him to get space and Carson have space to throw the football.
John McMullen, of course, check out his national column at FanRag Sports, at JF McMullen on Twitter. A couple quick hits around the league. They're going to go to Trubisky in Chicago. Any issue there?
No, I mean, I've been saying it since they drafted him. When you take a kid number 2 overall in a market that size, and you got a bad football team, you're going to be forced to play him, because people are going to start in immediately and say, well, why are we losing with Mike Glennon, who has no upside, versus losing with Mitchell Trubisky? He's going to struggle. That's a bad football team, but he's obviously got a ton of upside. He brings mobility to the table. He's far more accurate than Mike Glennon. Question is, with all guys like that, and I always point to David Carr, who had such tremendous talent. You sort of talk about the intangibles. Can they handle the losing? Can they handle the pounding they're going to take mentally, from a mental standpoint? Can they keep their confidence? I think that's going to be the most important thing to watch about Mitchell Trubisky, because the Bears are a bad football team.
What did we learn about Washington last night in a loss?
They're talented. And they got really, really banged up. And they almost still won that football game if Josh Doxson comes down with that circus catch. And I get it. I was laughing on Twitter when everyone's cursing out Doxson. There are a few receivers who even get to that football, and people are complaining because he couldn't hold on to it. But the Redskins are very good, and I talked about it when we discussed the NFC East. Everyone dismissed them because of the front office dysfunction, which is real, it's legitimate, and it could ultimately sink them. But they have a lot of good players, and people don't, for whatever reason, don't recognize it. And most notably defensively, Greg Minuski is the new defensive coordinator there. They are just a whole lot better defensively. Now, while I say that, they just got a ton of injuries in Kansas City, starting with Josh Norman. So we'll see how healthy they are, but they're better than people think they are.
Last one for John McMullen here. Of course, check him out on Sunday, live on the Countdown to Kickoff show, 10 a.m. from McFadden's at the ballpark, 3 hours before every Eagles game. The Countdown to Kickoff show, every home game outside McFadden's at the ballpark. The guys will be out there live this Sunday for Eagles and the Cardinals. Cardinals have been terrible in terms of protecting the quarterback. Carson Palmer's been sacked 17 times, most in the league. But the Eagles' pass rush the last couple of weeks, not as ferocious. What do you attribute that the Eagles haven't been able to get to the quarterback? They got to him 9 times during the first 2 games, but the last couple of weeks, I think they only had the 1 sack. Bo Allen, was that the only sack they have in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, Bo Allen's first sack. But, people have to realize the matchups and the fact that and Jim Schwartz talked about it today. They could have rushed 12 guys. They weren't sacking Eli Manning. That's how fast the ball was coming out. And they just weren't going to get to him. That was the Giants' game plan, and that's how they approached it. And if Eli Manning has the quickest release in football, Phillip Rivers might be second. So you sort of have to realize who you're playing against. And understand they're going to get the football out. Here you have a quarterback in Carson Palmer who's willing to stand in there, willing to let those long routes down the field develop and take a hit to try to make a big play. And this is a game where you can accumulate sacks. So I think if the Eagles come out of Sunday's game with no sacks, then you start asking questions. But that's not going to happen because Brandon Graham's going to be matched up against Jared Beldier, and that Carson Palmer might put a reservation in for the hospital early.
At JF McMullen on Twitter. Check him out over there. Don't forget his national column, National NFL Columnist, FanRag Sports, NFL, and, of course, all the Eagles stuff at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, John, we'll talk tomorrow, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.